This Torah class is brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.
Okay, good morning, Rabbi. Shalom Aleichem. Bruchim Abom to the Koilel Agar de Perko here in Kew Garden Hills, New York. Parshas Lech Lecha, Tafshin Ayin Ches. Says Gemara Masechta Sukkah on Daf Lamed Aleph. A very intriguing encounter. Hahi Sabasa. There's an Alta Yidina. There's an old woman. The Asoy LeKamed Rav Nachman. She comes before Rav Nachman, Amra Lei, and she says to Rav Nachman, I've got a problem. Reish Galusa, the Exilarch, the Kulu Rabbanan Dvei Reish Galusa, and all the rabbis of the house of the Exilarch, Besukkah Gazula Havayasvi. They're sitting in a stolen sukkah. So Rav says, you know, what's the problem? She said, because it's my sukkah. I want my sukkah back. Sukkah Gazula is psula, by the way. Sukkah Gzula is possible. We learn that from a pasuk. Chag HaSukkah is taselacha. Just to digress for a moment, Tosfos asks, why do I need a drasha? Sukkah Gzula is psula, tepiklei, that it's a mitzvah haba ba'avera. So Tosfos wants to answer, that has nothing to do with anything, by the way. Tosfos wants to answer that mitzvah haba ba'avera is only a psul d'Rabbanon. I need the pasuk to say that it's psul d'Oraisa. L'maisa Rabbeinu Tam Shita is mitzvah haba ba'avera is a psul d'Oraisa. So, like Rabbeinu Tam, why do I need a pasuk? So, there's a famous Minchas Chinuch that had it not been for the pasuk, the man is not yotze the mitzvah, but the sukkah is still, the chefza is still kosher. I need the pasuk to say the chefza is pasuk. Okay, that's free, no charge for the lamdas over there. Okay, but that's Machlokes, Tosfos, and the Minchas Chinuch, and there's a Rabbi Ber, and there's a Shari Yosher, and all kinds of treats on that sugya. But now the shaila the woman has is, she says, Savcha, she cries out, give me my sukkah back. V'lo yashkach ba. They didn't pay attention to her. V'lo yashkach ba Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman did not pay attention to her. So you have this lady, she's complaining, she's screaming, she's crying, and the rabbis don't give her the time of day. Amr alei! She says to him, Itza, I'm a woman. The havas leila avua that my tata had. Talas mea v'tam nisrei avde. 318 slaves. Tzavcha kamaychu, she's screaming before you. V'lo ashkachisaba, you're not paying attention to her. Do you know who I am? I'm a person whose my father had 318 slaves. Why don't you give me the time of day? Amar lahu Rav Nachman. Rav Nachman says, Pi'isahi, this woman's a kvetch. Ve'ein lo ela d'mei eitzim avad. She doesn't get her sukkah back. Just pay her for the wood. So certainly Rav Nachman may have been right that maybe this woman was a pi'isa, she might have been a kvetch, but at the end of the day is, what is this nonsense that this woman is spewing, that do you know who you're dealing with? She doesn't say, my father is the king of England. She doesn't say that, my Alta Zayda was, Rabbi Ber. She says, my father had 318 slaves. So first of all, good for him. It's very nice that her father had 318 slaves. Yeah, and what kind of car did he drive? And what? Yeah, but the point being, she wanted her sukkah back.
Yes, but she was right.
Yeah, she could have been right, but Rav Nachman's... Yeah, I'm not focusing on the halacha. She got her money, but she didn't get what she wanted. But what's the argument that she used? That my father had 318 slaves. I mean, say it straight. If she wants to say, I'm rich and powerful, let her say, I'm rich and powerful. Let her say, don't start up with me. I've got money. If that's what she's getting at, that she has money, so let her say, I'm going to call my mafioso friend, and he's going to knock you out. What is he talking about? What's she saying? That my father had 318 slaves. What's that got to do with it? What's the significance of the number 318? Okay, so perhaps. All right, so okay, fine. Don't spoil it. If you know, don't spoil it. I'm trying to give a shiur over here. Don't ruin it over here. There are people watching it, so don't give any clues. If you know it, just hang on, hold on to your horses. What? Are we going to develop it, or is the shiur going to end out? Likely that this shiur will continue for another 45 minutes. So let's be patient over here, and we'll try to get it all out. If you know the ending, if you know the punchline, you'll be rewarded min hashamayim if you're able to contain yourselves and control. Okay. Anyway, there's another Gemara. The Gemara says like this. The Gemara in Masechta Sanhedrin says on Daf Tzadi Zayin, TorahAnytime. When is Mashiach coming? You know? When is Mashiach coming? So, by the way, there are various shitas in the Rishonim. Shitas Rashi, 1352. Shitas Ramban, 1358. The Daf Yomi, right? Emasai Karasima. Okay, all kinds of shitas. Rabbi Shiur ben Levi, Hayoim. Yeah. But the Gemara says on Daf Tzadi Zayin, TorahAnytime, Ki Yadin Hashem Amoy, Ki Yira, Ki Azas Yad, V'efes Atzor V'azav. Says the Gemara, this pasuk of Ki Yadin Hashem Amoy, Ki Yira, Ki Azas Yad is the main clue for when Mashiach is coming. Says the Gemara, Ein ben David ba'ad she'es yashum enagula. Mashiach will not come until people think he's not coming. Mashiach will not come until people think that he's not coming. You know the famous story in 67. There's a lot of messianic talk. Okay, Mashiach is coming. Rabbi Yaakov gives a clap on the bima that he knows for sure Mashiach is not coming. So you say, Rabbi, even if you're not a supporter of Zionism, but you don't know for sure he's not coming, how do you know for sure he's not coming? So Yaakov said one thing's for sure, when everybody thinks he's coming, then we know for sure he's not coming. Like the Gemara says, Mashiach is not coming, Ad she'yashu min ha'geula. Why is that important? Why would Mashiach only come when people finally give up hope? Okay, Rabbi Say, I don't want you to have to contain yourselves any longer. Let's cut to the chase. Vayishma Avram heard ki nishba achiv, that his brother was captured. Vayarak es chanichav, and he trained his young men. Yelidei Beisai, those who were born in his house. Shmoina asar ushloish me'os, 318. Vayirdoif Adan. So the simple meaning of the pasuk is, Avraham Avinu, or at this point he's called Avram, he took with him 318 soldiers. Comes Rashi, and Rashi says, Rabbi Seinu Amru, Eliezer Levadoi Haya. Our rabbis tell us that it was not 318, it was Eliezer. V'hu minyan gematria shel Shemai, and the numerical value of Eliezer is 318. Fine. So what's going on over here? But I don't understand. That's not what the pasuk says. The pasuk says he took 318 men. So what is Rashi bothered by? It's not 318, it's Eliezer. No, Rashi, that's not what it says. It says 318. If the Torah was telling me that he took Eliezer, then the Torah would have said clearly, he took Eliezer. Ein mikor yotzei midei pshutai. And Rashi, we know his klal is, Vani laibasi ela l'pshutai shel mikra. So why is Rashi quoting the Gemara that it was only Eliezer, and the gematria of his name is 318? So right off the back, Rabbi said, we go back to the Gemara in Sukkah, and if this woman is saying, do you know who I am? My father had 318 slaves. There's no question that what she was referring to... What? Sure. There's no question that what she was referring to was that her great ancestor, Avraham, had 318 slaves. She's a descendant of Avraham Avinu. Okay, so if that's what she meant, that she's a descendant of Avraham Avinu, she should say, please, have Rachmanas on me. I'm a Jewish person. I'm a descendant. I'm Bas Avraham Yitzchak V'Yaakov. Is that how you refer to Avraham Avinu? Right? If you wanted to make reference to Avraham Avinu, we say, you know who Avraham Avinu was? Let's give him a little caption. He was the man who had 318 slaves. You would have said Avraham Oyhavi, like the Navi Yeshaya says. You would have called him the greatest Baal Chesed, Esan Hoezrachi. I'm not familiar with any other place in Kala Torah Kula that when referring to Avraham Avinu, we refer to him as the man who had 318 slaves. Like in the Yotzros, when we give titles for Avraham Avinu, I guarantee you, one of the great appellations that are given to the patriarch Abraham is, our forefather, you know how great he was? He had 318 slaves. I mean, even at somebody's eulogy, you could have the biggest oisher in the world. Nobody's reading off at the Levaya how much their stocks are worth, how much real estate they own. This is what the woman is proud of. I come from Avraham Avinu.
Today you would be a racist.
What, a racist?
Today you'd be a racist.
Today? I try not to be a racist publicly, and okay. So, now what does it mean that she refers to Avraham Avinu as a guy who had 318 slaves? Why does the Torah say that if Avraham Avinu only took Eliezer, that he took 318? So Rabbeinu Bechaye says as follows. Comes Rabbeinu Bechaye, and Rabbeinu Bechaye says, "Vayishma Avram ki nishba achiv, he girded himself with strength when he heard what happened. And from here we learn, says Rabbeinu Bechaya, that Avram Avinu had 318 slaves. Begamatria Eliezer. So says the Rabbeinu Bechaya v'yesh lishal, because according to the Medrash, the number 318 is not kipshutai. It's a riddle. It's referring to Eliezer. So ein mikro yotzim minei pshutai. It says he took 318. Says Rabbeinu Bechaya, elu ve'elu divrei Elokim chayim. He took 318 and he took Eliezer. How's that? He had 318 oichlei shulchanoi, and he girded them and he trained them and he armed them and they practiced. And after they prepared themselves to go out to war, Vayorek, he emptied them out. Why did he empty them out? Because we know that winning a war is not dependent on brute strength. Winning a war is dependent on zechus. And we know that in general, when we go out to war, an announcement is made that anybody who is not qualified to fight, get lost, go back, get off the battlefront. So he started off with 318 warriors, but then Vayorek mean he trained them, he armed them. It could also a lashon of reik, he emptied them out. In other words, after deciphering, after going through their accounting, he realized none of them were worthy to fight the war, and therefore he sent so many back home. Do you know how many were left? None were left except for Eliezer. Eliezer was the only one who was worthy to remain on the battlefront. Therefore, says Rabbeinu Bechaya, the word chanichav could be read chanichai. He trained his men, and vayorek es chanichai, he emptied it out until he was left with only one. Who was he left with? Shmoina asar shloish meos. He started with 318, and he was left with 318. He started with 318 men, and he's left only with Eliezer. Comes Tosfos, and Tosfos explains that we know when you go out to war, so the general makes a big announcement. Anyone here get engaged to a woman and not seal the deal, not consummate the marriage, get lost. You need to go home. Anyone buy a house, have a great day. Anyone buy a house and not inaugurate it, go home. Anybody buy a vineyard and not enjoy it, go home. And then the pasuk says, Umi ha'ish hayare v'rach halevav. Anyone here scared? Any scaredy cats here? Anybody nervous? Get lost. Get lost. Says the Yushalmi, what is the guy afraid of? Is he scared? Me avera shabiyadai. What is the avera that we're talking about? I think it's machlokes between the Bavli and the Yushalmi. The Bavli says the avera is he talked between the tefillin shel yad and the tefillin shel rosh. That's a chet that warrants a person is not worthy to fight on behalf of the Jewish people. But the Yushalmi says, what are we talking about? Hasach ben yishtabach liyotzer. If somebody speaks out between yishtabach and yotzer, they're out, they're lost. They don't have the merit to be protected during battle. So I ask you a kasha. That's when the guy spoke out. That's the only time in davening you're allowed to talk. You are permitted to talk between the end of Yishtabach and the beginning of Yotzer. The answer is you're only allowed to talk Ledvar Mitzvah. If it's not a Dvar Mitzvah, it's the most lenient part of davening when it comes to talking. The most lenient. So I remember I was once where I was a rabbi. It was a hard time making a minyan. Sometimes we had to get a 10th and a 9th or so on and so forth. So sometimes make a phone call. So make sure to say Yishtabach. And I asked the Shaila, you can make a phone call to get a 10th person for a minyan between Yishtabach and the beginning of Yotzer. Why? Because it's mutter to talk then Ledvar Mitzvah. This was a Dvar Mitzvah. But if it's not a Dvar Mitzvah, it's such a serious infraction to talk then that you would not be qualified to defend the Jewish people in the army. So you say, but that means that if somebody talks by Chazaras Hashatz, he can't fight for the Jewish people? Exactly, that's right. If you talk by Chazaras Hashatz, it's such a terrible Avera that you're disqualified and you will not, chas v'shalom, be protected if one goes out to war to defend Klal Yisrael. But what do you mean? It's Mechemes Mitzvah. You're defending the Jewish people. It's a shas sakana. You don't want to have that on your cheshbon. But that means if someone talks by Kaddish, he can't defend the Jewish people. That's right. It's such a terrible avera. What? No, to defend Klal Yisrael and Eretz Yisrael. Why isn't it a Mechemes Mitzvah?
No. But to defend Klal Yisrael, even a bride.
These what? Oh, you mean these?
Mitzvah only, that one.
You mean saying if it's a chemes mitzvah, we'll send anybody out? Okay, it could be. So bottom line is, you still can't talk about Chazar Sashatz. Still, the Shulchan Aruch says Hasach Sichas Chulin. What is it? It's Gadol Avoinoi Minasai. The sin is akin to murder. V'gairin by, we scream at you. So next time, if Chas Hashem, you forget and you talk and someone screams at you, to thank them for fulfilling the halacha and Shulchan Aruch of Gairin by. You do tshuva, and then you're good to go. Then you're clean.
Maybe he doesn't want to go to war.
What? I mean, maybe it's a draft exemption. Yeah, it's well known in Vietnam. A lot of people did that. They spoke by Chazar Sashatz to get out of the war. Yeah, it's the oldest trick in the book, you know? Anyway, so... What? Yeah. Anyway, Rabbi say, weiter, if you look in Parshas, in the war, the 4 kings and the 5 kings, yeah, a joke is a joke, okay? In the war of the 4 kings and the 5 kings, Vayichalek aleim laila, he divided the night. Who? Va'avadav, Avraham and his servants, Vayakem, and he smote them, Vayirdefem ad choy va'asher mismal adam asak. So what does the pasuk say? Vayichalek aleim, it should say bil laila. He divided his troops during the night. Literally, Vayichalek aleim laila means he divided the night. What does it mean he divided the night? How do you divide the night? Says Rashi, Umedrash Haggadah, he split the night. The first half of the night, he made the miracle of Abraham defeating the 4 kings. The second half of the night is guarded and protected and preserved for Yetzias Mitzrayim. So Rashi is being megala to us, a tremendous sight, that we would have expected that a miracle is a miracle. And Hashem does miracle A, and miracle B, and miracle C, and they have nothing to do with each other. Rashi says, no. There is one miraculous night. Half of it was the victory of Abraham over the 4 kings. The other half is the Yetziah from Yetzias Mitzrayim. Why did the Rebbeinu Shem have to divide the night? That to save one half for the victory of Abraham over the 4 kings, and the other half the Yetziah from Yetzias Mitzrayim. What's the connection between Abraham overcoming the 4 kings and Yetzias Mitzrayim? Rabbi say, we're now going to talk about a challenge that every Jew faces. This is a nisayon and a difficulty that at some point or other we all have to overcome and we're all confronted with. And in a way, this is one of the biggest challenges in life. Pasuk says, Kiseitse la melchama ala yavecha. When you go out to war against your enemy, for Isa sus v'rechav, you see horse and chariot. Am rav memcha, a nation greater than you. Lo sira mehem, fear not. Ki Hashem Elokecha, Hashem your God, imach, He's with you. Hamalcha me'eretz Mitzrayim, He took you out of the land of Egypt. So, pshuta k'mashmai, you're fighting a war, you see a lot of soldiers coming out against you, horses and chariots, steeds, they're making a lot of ruckus, you're very afraid. Don't be afraid, Hashem's with you. Says Orach Chaim HaKadosh, this pasuk has another meaning as well. There's another war that every Jew faces, and this is the greatest war in life. This is the war against the Yetzer Hara. As the Chavis Habavai says, a soldier once came back from battle, and he bumps into a Chacham, and the Chacham says, where are you coming from? And the soldier says, I'm coming back from war. And the Chacham says, you're returning from the small war, now you face the great war. He said, what are you talking about? You're coming from the battlefield, now you have to fight Milchemes HaYitzar. And the most powerful and vicious and poisonous attack of the Yetzer Hara is when a Yid wants to do a mitzvah, you come to shul, and you want to daven with kavanah, or you want to learn, and you want to do a big mitzvah, and you really have a hisayrus to come closer to Rebbeinu Shalom. The Yetzer Hara comes and says, you oisvarf, you're going to do a mitzvah. Have you spent your life properly? You're going to do a mitzvah after doing the X, Y, and Z for 50 years, for 40 years, for 70 years. You know what kind of Avarian you are? You know what kind of Russia you are? You're going to daven with kavanah. You know how many hundreds of tefillos without kavanah you said? You know how much you think the Rebbeinu Shalom likes you? You know how dirty you are? You know how sullied you are? You know how disgusting you are to Hashem? And the Yetzer Hara then paints all the poisonous malachim that you created from your averos. And the Yetzer Hara says, You're going out to do war against the Yetzer Hara, and you want to do a mitzvah, and the Yetzer Hara shows you all of these disgusting meisim that you did. You know what you've been doing for the last 10 years? You know what you did last night, and now you want to do a mitzvah? All of these disgusting malachim, sus v'rechev, am rav, the Yetzer Hara says, all of these thousands of averos, you know who did them? Mimcha, you did it. So, you're barking up the wrong tree. Leave the mitzvahs to, some pure yeshiva boy who maybe has a chance in life. He has a bright future. He has potential. You're already messed up. You're long gone. You're off the beaten path. You're mi bachutz. God's not interested in you. Says the Torah HaKadosha, Ki seitze la melchama ala yavecha. When you go out to war against your enemy, and this enemy is the biggest enemy in the world, the Yetzer Hara, and he's going to show you all the horses and all the malachim, mimcha, says the Torah HaKadosha, lo yisira mehem. Don't be afraid of him. You know why you don't need to be afraid of the Yetzer Hara? Ki Hashem Elokecha yimach, God is with you. Hamalcha me'eretz Mitzrayim, He took you out of the land of Egypt, and we're going to explain. The greatest arsenal in the powers and the forces of the Yetzer Hara is a 4-letter word. We don't like to say this word, especially on Marav. It's not really, but just for Torah here. You know what this 4-letter word is? It's called Yush. Yush is the most powerful weapon of the Yetzer Hara. There is no feeling that restrains and squelches and pains and causes a person to withdraw and debilitates a person. There is no more debilitating feeling than Yush, than hopelessness. Whether it's in the physical world, somebody's dealing with health, and there's a certain issue. The moment a person feels yush, that is the most debilitating. You're sapped of all energy. You're sapped of all zest. You don't have any desire anymore to forge ahead, to push ahead, to accomplish. Yush saps the life out of you. Emotionally, people have worries, anxieties, fears. This specifically what I'm referring to, there's a very beautiful sefer. The name of the sefer is Eitzos v'Hadrachos. If you look at number 11. Eitzos v'Hadrachos, which was written by somebody, Rabbi Yaakov Greenwald, who was considered a big Talmud of the Stipler. He's also a psychologist based out of Muncie. And he wrote advice to people suffering from emotional distress, anxiety, nervousness, depression, OCD. Unfortunately, in our generation, there are very many choilei hanefesh, and many, many, many people, and everybody to some extent suffers emotionally. We're a very weak, emotional constitution, and people are soivel very great challenges. And the one feeling that is more debilitating and really sucks the life out of a person more than anything else is yush. You don't feel there's any light in life. There's no hope in life. It just saps a person of all of their energy. Look at number 11. Mikol rigshe ha'adam. From all of man's feelings. Lo nimtza regesh sheish b'koichai lichboish lahastir v'lemnoya v'af ledake koiches hanefesh. There is no feeling more debilitating to sort of lock a person into chains from unleashing their ability more than Yush. And the moment a person falls into Yush, he thinks all hope is lost. There's no life. They feel choking. There's no hope. And Yush causes a person to see everything, with black glasses. Often a person feels Yush spiritually. A person might feel they're so accustomed to a certain Avera, they'll never get out of it. They'll never do tshuva. They'll never be a person who the Rebbeinu Shalom is proud of. Especially when it comes to young people, there are certain averos that if you look in the Zohar HaKadosh says openly that there are certain averos you can't do tshuva for. The language of the Zohar is, and this is something that all the Sfarim deal with, specifically the Sifrei Chasidus, and the Sifrei Machshava, the Zohar says for the Ched of Hoitzoa Zera Levatala, you can't do tshuva. So you have a young man, you deal with yeshiva bachrim, and they hear this, oh, you can't do tshuva, forget it, I'm a rasha, the Rebbe Shalom hates me, I can never clean myself off, I have no hope. And these type of thoughts are the most debilitating thoughts, whether it's in the physical world, the emotional world, the spiritual world. Yush is the greatest weapon in the arsenal of the Yetzer Hara.
Those are true thoughts.
And in a way they are true thoughts, because there are... so what do you do? Because there are physical conditions that it does seem very hopeless. And you know what? Sometimes v'derech hateva, maybe there is no way out. And there are emotional distresses that things do seem very bleak. And sometimes a person could fall spiritually that it does seem v'derech hateva that there's no way out. So what does a person do in all of those situations? The answer is we have to look in the Gemara in Brachas and Daf Yud. Please take a look at number 12. Says the Gemara, there was a man by the name of Yeshayahu ben Amitz, and he went to visit his good friend Chizkiyahu HaMelech. And the Torah says Chizkiyahu was Chala Lamos. And Yeshaya says, I've got bad news for you, Chizkiyahu, and I've got worse news. So Chizkiyahu says, first tell me the bad news. So the bad news, Yeshaya says, is you're going to die. So Chizkiyahu says, maybe we should hold it here then. Right? Now what's the worst news? He says, Chai ki meis ata v'lo sichya. You're going to die and you're not going to live. So Chizkiyahu says, with bad news like that, I can't get that much worse. Lay it on. He says, you're going to die b'olam hazeh and you have no chelek in olam haba. Chizkiyahu said, you sure you sent this to the right address? You sure you got the right address over here? I'm a good guy. I'm the king of Israel. In the times of Chizkiyahu, there was tremendous Talmud Torah. Chizkiyahu put a sword in every base medrash. Either learn Torah or I'm going to kill you. By the way, it's a very effective way. If you're a Rav and you want to get people to learn, you put a sword.
He'll be out the next day.
No, they have to be tough.
He'll be tough, but it'll be tough.
No, you know what Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter says that any rabbi that they don't want to kick out of town is not a rabbi. And any rabbi they kick out of town is not a man. So you got to be a man. You can't be afraid. So that's what Chizkiyahu did. He put a sword at the entrance of the Beis Medrash. Anyone who doesn't come to Shiur, I'm going to kill them with the sword. If you look in the Hakdama, the Netziv, he says, how is he allowed to do that? He said, he's allowed to do that because if people aren't learning, you don't win the war. So if you don't win the war, Klal Yisrael is in sakana. So it's pikuach nefashos. He had to save the Jewish people. Anyway, that's for a different time. So Chizkiyahu said, what did I do wrong? So Yeshaya said, what did you do wrong? You didn't want to have children. He said, what do you want for my life? I see Baruch HaKodesh. I'm going to have bad kids. And Yeshaya tells him the famous words, Bahade, Kavshed, Rachmana, Lamalach. What are you meddling in the affairs of heaven? You do what you have to do, and God will do what He wants to do. So Chizkiyahu said, okay, big talker, so let me marry your daughter. And maybe between my zchus and your zchus, we'll have good children. He said, it's a good idea, but here's the problem. The problem is, there's already a gezerah. Kvar nigzera alecha gezerah. So Chizkiyahu turns to Yeshaya and he said, you're a nice man, Yeshaya. Ben amoitz kalei nevuascha v'tzei. Go fly a kite. Kach mikoblani mi beis avi abba. I have a tradition from my grandfather. Afilu cherev chada munachas al tzavoroi shal adam al yimna atzmai min arachamim. I'm not worried. Even when the knife is against the neck, never give up hope. God could always save. You say there's a gzera, yafa tza'aka la'olam afilu la'achar hagzarden. What did Chizkiyahu mean? I have a tradition from my grandfather that afilu cherev chada munachas al tzavari shal adam al yimna atzmai min arachamim. Who was the grandfather of Chizkiyahu? Presumably David HaMelech. He was a descendant of David. Presumably what Chizkiyahu meant was, I already know from my grandfather many times was in very dire situations. He was always running away, and God saved him. Gam kielech beget samaves, la irara ki ata imadi, and I have that tradition. I'm not worried. But maybe we'll explain a little bit deeper. What did Chizkiyahu mean? Afilu cherev chada. He has a tradition from Avi Abba. Marva Aboisai. We're now going to take a look at the the seminal words of Reb Tzadok HaKohen of Lublin. I left my notes at home. I think he lived from 1823 to 1900. Reb Tzadok HaKohen, one of the all-time great, brilliant minds. And if there's any theme that you could say was the most pronounced theme of Reb Tzadok HaKohen, I would say this is it. If there's any piece in the writings of Reb Tzadok which really capture the message of Reb Tzadok HaKohen, I think this is it. Reb Tzadok HaKohen writes in the Divrei Sofrim, Ein liyehudi lehisyayesh mishum davar. A Jew never gives up hope. The definition of a Yid is we never give up hope. Whether in the physical world, whether a person is in danger, afilu cherav chada munachas al tzavar shel adam, we don't give up hope. Whether in the spiritual world, says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, even if a person is so sullied in sins that the Zohar says you can't do tshuva, you could do tshuva. There's no such thing as not doing tshuva. What did the Rebbeinu Shalom say to Acher? Hashem said to Acher, Shuvu vanim shoivavim chutz me'acher. Hashem didn't mean it. Even Acher could have done tshuva. The famous Varta the Shla. Kol ma she'omer lecha ba'al habayis aseh chutz mitzeh. Whatever the host tells you to do, you listen until he tells you to get lost. Who's the ba'al habayis of this world? God. You listen to everything God tells you unless He says, get lost, you can't do tshuva. When God says, say, don't listen to Him, He doesn't mean it. It says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, Bein ba'olam hazeh, Bein ba'olam haba. Whether personally, a person thinks, I'm so addicted to X, Y, and Z, I can never extricate myself from it. Al yisliyayish. Ein Yush Klal Eitzel Yehudi. There is no such thing as Yush. Why is that? Why is there no such thing as Yush for a Jew? Says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, it's built into the DNA of a Jew that there's no such thing as giving up hope. Let's think about the origins of the Jewish people. So let's go back to our forefathers. Let's paint the picture that we would imagine. So there was a nice boy. He came right out of yeshiva. He was the biggest Mitsuyan, and he went to Brisk. Then he went to Lakewood. He's 23 years old. He's boy number one. He gets engaged to some girl, Sarah, 19 years old. And then 9 months later, right, they have their first kid. No, but that's not what happened. Avram Avinu was already 99 years old. Avram Avinu is not just an old man. The Medrash says he's toichein ve'enoi poilet. That means he can't do it. He's not able to. Sarah Imenu. She's an Akara, right? No. She's worse than an Akara. The Gemara Nivama says, Sarah Imenu, Eilenes Haisa. She has no rechem. So if they would have gone to the specialist and they would get their fertility rate, the doctor would not have said, it's improbable, it's unlikely, it's very remote. The doctor would say it's downright impossible. And yet, we're all here today. Why did the Rebbeinu Shalom build Klal Yisrael out of the impossible? So that it's built into the fabric of our DNA that there's no such thing as Yush, that there's no such thing as impossible, that there's no such thing as beyond hope. That is the very creation of Klal Yisrael. Klal Yisrael was built on overcoming the four-letter word, the most poisonous word in Judaism, Yush. And therefore, you want to know when Mashiach comes? Mashiach will come, Rebbeinu Shalom will show, when you think it will never come, that's when it's going to come. And Avraham Avinu, Rosh Umasenu, the progenitor, the beginning of our people, when he hears that light is captured, what's the man doing? What's he thinking? You know who Avraham Avinu is up against? He's not up against the 5 kings. The 5 kings were nothing compared to the 4 kings. The 4 kings wiped out the 5 kings. They were the most powerful axis or allies in the world. And Avraham Avinu is not going with 318 men. He's going with one person. What got into the man? What is that called? What is the situation called? Impossible. What should Avraham Avinu done? If it was me, if it was you, what would we have done? Call it a day, throw in the towel. The 4-letter word, Yush. There was such Yush that the Melech Sodom said, you know what? Kach Es harachush kachlach. You could take our possessions. We're miyayish from it again. We know we're never going to get it back. But Avraham Avinu knows that even though Yush is a very daunting challenge, and it's the most difficult challenge in the world, because when things seem bleak and impossible, human nature is throw in the towel. There's only one way to overcome Yush. Because the gematria of Yush is 317. Yud is 10. Aleph is 1. Vav is 6. Shin is 300. Yush is 317. How do you overcome Yush? When you realize that there's someone standing on your right side who could yank you out. If a person recognizes that the Rebbeinu Shalom is with him, then he overcomes Yush. What word symbolizes the available help of the Borei Olam? Eliezer. Where is the first time the name Eliezer is explained? Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu calls his first son Eliezer. Because he says, Ki Elokei avi be'ezri vayatzileni mecherev paroi. Why did Moshe Rabbeinu call his son Eliezer? Because when he stood in Paro's palace, and Paro stretched out the sword and swung it at the neck of Moshe Rabbeinu, was there ever a moment in life that called for years, that called for hopelessness, that allowed a person to say, you know what? It's time to give in, it's time to let up, it's time to throw in the towel. It would have been the moment that that sword was up against the neck of Moshe Rabbeinu. But Moshe was saved. He didn't fall into Yush because he recognized that when the Rebbeinu Shalom is standing at your right side, everything and anything is possible. Ki Elokei avi be'ezri. Eliezer is gematria 318. Yush is 317. How do you overcome Yush? How do you overcome despondency, sadness, hopelessness with the force of emunah? Ki Elokei avi be'ezri. Says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, V'zehu remez Mispar Shloish Meos Shmaina Esrei Begematria Yush. Yush is 317. The way I'm saying it is through the power of Eliezer, a person's able to overcome Yush. Yes, should Avraham Avinu thrown in the towel? Should he have been miyayish? He had every right to be. But he recognized the way to overcome hopelessness is the emunah in the help of the Rebbeinu Shalom. How often in life do we look up to the heavens and we throw our hands up and we say, Shir la mahalois, Esa einai el haharim, me'ayin yavoy ezri. How often in life do we throw up our hands and say, me'ayin, where is my help going to come from? Where is it going to be? Me'ayin yavoy ezri. You know where your hope is going to come from? Me'ayin. It seems impossible. Nothing. It seems absolutely impossible. You know what the answer is? It is impossible. There is no hope. But the answer is, Ezri me'im Hashem, oisei shamayim va'aretz. My help will come from Hashem, who created heaven and earth. How did Hashem create heaven and earth? What did Hashem make heaven and earth out of? What was the building block of heaven and earth? Yesh me'ayin. So when you want to know, me'ayin yavoy ezri, don't worry. It will come from the one who created the world, shamayim va'aretz me'ayin. He could help you when it's impossible. He could help you when there's no hope. When it's me'ayin yavoy ezri, all you need to do is be mamin, ezri me'im Hashem, oisei shamayim va'aretz. That's how you overcome Yush. Comes the Alta Yidina to Rav Nachman. He says, Rabbi Nachman, I have one question for you. Why do you think that they're not giving me my sukkah back? The only reason they're allowed to keep it is because I know they're a bunch of mafioso. So what we have over here, you think is Yush. I gave up hope. But even Yush, you can't keep it. You need Yush. And now it's in your Rishus, Shinoi Rishus. Rav Nachman, you know who I am. I come from Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu had 318 slaves, meaning Eliezer. My DNA is Elokei avi be'ezri. My DNA is I never give up hope. My DNA is there's no such thing as Yush. If there's no Yush, you're a Ganav. Give me my sukkah back. I come from Avraham Avram Avinu. My DNA is Elekei Avi B'Ezri. My DNA is 318 slaves. My DNA is Ezri Me'am Hashem Oisei Shemayim Ba'aretz. There's no yish. I wasn't meyayish on the sukkah. You're sitting in a stolen sukkah. Give me my sukkah back. Says Reb Tzadok HaKohen.
There's no yish on it. How do you extend it to
That's what Reb Nachman. Look, that's what she said.
the whole Masech on you?
The counter to the Shiur is what Reb Nachman. That's why I'm not bringing what Reb Nachman said. Reb Nachman said she's a kvetch, right? And we're not buying it. But at least what was her argument? Her argument was, DNA. It's not in our DNA. Comes up Tzadok HaKohen says, what's this got to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim? Here you have the guy, he's taka, after many years of being distant from Hashem, he's afraid to come close. He does feel sullied. He does feel dirty. He does feel unworthy. Says Ribbon Shalom, Hashem Elokecha imach hamalcha me'eretz Mitzrayim. Says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, what is the most central idea in Judaism, the most oft-repeated idea? There is no question, the idea is Zecher Li'Yetzias Mitzrayim. You put on tzitzis, Zecher Li'Yetzias Mitzrayim. You put on tefillin, Zecher Li'Yetzias Mitzrayim. You say Kriya Shema, Zecher Li'Yetzias Mitzrayim. Kiddush, Sukkah, Matzah. All right, enough already. I won't forget. I know Hashem took me out of Mitzrayim. I mean, how many times a day do I really need to remember? And not only that, to add, every door I go out of, I have to have this piece of this instructions in the doorpost to remind me, Zecher Li'Yetzias Mitzrayim. Okay, I won't forget. Says Reb Tzadok HaKohen, no. The most important idea in Judaism is remember Hashem took you out of Mitzrayim. Why is it so important? It happened 3,300 years ago. Why is this so crucial? Because every moment of our life, the Yetzer Hara is screaming at us, you can't do it, you won't be a Talmid Chacham, you won't be a big Oved Hashem, you won't accomplish in life, you're dirty, you're sullied, you're disgusting. So we tell the Yetzer Hara, wait a second, really? Let's think about Klal Yisrael Mitzrayim. They're on the 50th Kamat, they're on the brink of the 50th level of Tumah. Had they remained there a moment longer, they would have fallen to the point of no return. They were Ovdei Avodah Zarah. They were Eiroim Ve'Arya. They were naked and bare. They were on the lowest level of any time in the history of Klal Yisrael. And even so, the Ribbon Shalom yanked them out, and in a very short amount of time, He elevated them to the level where they were pointing the next day, 7 days later, Zeh Keli V'Yanveu. What did they say? Yetzer Hara, I'm not afraid of you. Zecher Li'Yetzias Mitzrayim. That's the most important theme in Judaism. It doesn't matter what you've done. It doesn't matter where you are. You could yank yourself up immediately. How? But what about Yush? Nah, Yush is only 317. Eliezer is 318. With the help of Hashem, you could always overcome Yush.
Wasn't the generation of the Holocaust survivors the biggest? They had the biggest challenge of Yeush.
Yeah.
To overcome it by rebuilding.
Yeah, that's a beautiful example. My grandfather was interviewed after the war. He said, Rabbi, you saw the greatest devastation to your people. You saw the murder of your brothers and sisters. Did you at any point lose faith? So my grandfather said, did I lose faith? Of course I lost faith. I lost faith in man. How could a civilization like Germany, one night they're in the concert halls and the next night they're gassing millions of people. I lost faith. How could the United States of America put their head in the sand? They knew exactly what was happening. There's evidence that Roosevelt bombed around the death camps, and he didn't want to bomb the death camps. So I lose faith. I lost faith in man. But never for a moment did I lose faith in my God. A Jew never loses faith. Ein li Yehudi lihis yayish. Who is the ultimate example? Who is the ultimate illustration of being able to overcome the impossible? Avraham Avinu fighting the war against the 4 kings. So let's talk about the personal history of Eliezer. Do you remember when Abraham proposes to Eliezer, do me a favor, go find a shidduch for Yitzchak. So Eliezer says, I got a great idea. Say Chazal. What Eliezer was saying is, I got a daughter. Maybe you want to be Meshadach Zayin. I mean, if I'm good enough to schlep me out in the middle of the night, to risk my life to fight the 4 kings, maybe my daughter also we could take into account over here in the shidduch scene. What's wrong with her? So Amram Sina says, nothing wrong with her. It's just you're an error. You're just, who said racism? Yeah, exactly. Right? You're an error, and I'm a baruch, and we don't mix. Meaning, I'm blessed, you're rotten to the core, you're disgusting, you're cursed, and, good people and bad people, we're not mashadach. It's important in shidduchim people be transparent. You're not interested in a shidduch? Don't say, not right now. No, you say, you're Arur and I'm Baruch, and that's it. It doesn't go. That was a joke. Yeah? So basically, Amar Avinu is being outright, and he's saying, it's not going to go. However, Chazal say that when Eliezer returned faithfully, now if we were Eliezer, imagine you're sitting by your Rebbe. Eliezer was Damesek Eliezer, who was Doile Umashka Mitarasa Sharabe Lacher. Imagine you're sitting by your Rebbe, and you think you're like the Rebbe's prize student, and you say, Anshildik me Rebbe, maybe I could get into the family. The Rebbe says, you're a nice guy, but you're mamish and oisvarf, so we can't marry into. So how would you feel? How would the person feel? So I don't know, the classic thing in this, you have a guy, he's 50 years old, 40 years old, at least 35, I know. Why don't you daven? You come to shul, you sit there, you don't say a word. Why don't you daven? Because when I was in 3rd grade, my Rebbe looked at me, gave me a look, and everything is his. I haven't learned a word since. So basically, people walk around, right, with a chip on their shoulder because of the 3rd grade Rebbe. So you say, get over it. It's not so easy. People can't get over it. Why? It's Yush. People have a hard time getting over past experiences. So imagine if you were Eliezer and Avram Avinu told you, you're an Arur. I don't know, he would drop out of yeshiva and that's it, call it a day. No. Eliezer persevered. Eliezer was loyal to Avram Avinu. And when he came back, Avram Avinu said, Baruch Hashem, blessed of God. Say Chazal, Al Yedei Shesherei Say Tzadik Be'amuna Yatsa Meklal Arur Leklal Baruch. What do you mean, Yatsa Meklal Arur Leklal Baruch? I mean, if you're an Arur, you're an Arur. It's not like you could change it. I mean, Eliezer, you would have thought Eliezer should have turned to Avram and say, what do you mean I'm an Arur? I'm your Talmud. So it's, the answer is like somebody saying, if to a Nesin or somebody of illegitimate lineage, I'm sorry, you're a good guy. The problem is you have bad lineage. But Eliezer was able to overcome being an Arur. How is it possible to overcome being an Arur? It's not something you could extricate from. It is. You could extricate from anything. There's a solution for everything. He was an Arur, but he, if more than anybody else recognized, there's no such thing as Yush. Yush is 3:17, L-I-K, Avi Be'ezri, he removed himself from Arur. He can now marry into the family. More than that, says Arizal. Eliezer elevated himself so greatly that you know who the Gilgal of Eliezer was? You'll never guess unless you cheat. Yeah? Kalev ben Yefune. Kalev ben Yefune. Kalev ben Yefune. How's that possible? It's Hafla of a fella, one of the Tzadikei Olam. How's that? Here the man is dealing with Eliezer as an Arur. Avram Avinu says he can't marry into the family, and he turned it around because he realized there's nothing that's hopeless, there's nothing that's impossible, there's nothing that cannot be overcome. Marv Rabbi said, what's Avraham Avinu doing, rescuing Light? I mean, the guy, he's obviously not a great guy. He put himself in tremendous danger. Right? Light says, Avram, even though you're a big tzaddik and you have a very pleasant and holy household, I would prefer to live in Sodom where they sodomize innocent visitors. That's my cup of tea. Okay, so adios amigo, have a good day. I'm trying to be mashpia on you, but if you choose, you want to go move to San Francisco, what do you want from my life? Now I have to go. Good audience there, yeah? So what do you want from my life? Avram Avinu is trying his best. So if Lot risks his life, or Lot wants to go live in Sodom, now Avram Avinu wants to go save Lot. So the Zohar HaKadosh says, it wasn't Lot. It was who had come out of Lot. That Avram Avinu recognized that coming from Lot is none other than the neshama of David HaMelech. And Avram Avinu basically risked his life to save Mashiach. That's what the Zohar says. In fact, the Medrash says the same thing. It says, "V'gam leloid hahoylech es Avram hayatzayin ubakar v'ayhalem." Says the Medrash in Bereshis Rabbah, The Oihalim refer to Rus and Nama, that Avraham Avinu went to rescue Lot from Sodom. That's why the pasuk says, Matsasi David Avdi, I found David my servant. Where did Hashem find David? Says a Medrash, Bistain. So my Rabbi say, it comes out very beautiful. Whose neshama was, so to speak, lost in Sodom, endangered in Sodom, in a situation where it's almost hopeless he'll ever get out? Whose neshama, so to speak, was in the most desperate situation of all time? David. Poor David's in Light. Light is captured by the 4 kings. There's no way out. But David HaMelech realizes, Gam ki elech begeit salmaves lo ira ra. Why? Ki ata imadi. And Avram Avinu did the impossible. He overcome 317. He overcame Yush with Elokei Avi Be'ezri. And he goes to rescue Light. So therefore, who knew firsthand that no matter how desperate the situation is, with the help of Hashem, you could get out of it? David! David knew it from being under the domain of the 4 kings. David knew it from being in Sodom. And therefore, when Yeshaya Hanavi comes to Chizkiyahu and he says, you're a dead man, and you're not going to live, Chizkiyahu said, you know who you're dealing with? Kach mi koblani mi beis avi abba. I have a tradition from David. Tradition from David? Where do we find that David ever gave over a tradition that even when things are desperate, the Rebbeinu Shalom could yank you out? The answer is because David was hidden in Sodom, David was in Light, David was captured by the 4 kings, and it was an impossible situation. But David HaMelech says, Shuva Hashem chaltza nafshi. God, turn to me and save me. What are the Rashi Tevos? Says the Sefer Likutei Ma'amar Shvili Pinchas. Shuva Hashem chaltza. Shuva Hashem chaltza. Shin Yud Ches. What Shin Yud Ches? 3:18. David says, I know this is impossible, but I'm not worried, because Yush is only 3:17. But Shuva Hashem Chalsa, 3:18. God, you're going to yank me out. That's the attitude of a Yid. What's the attitude of a guy? Vayichlu amayim min hachemes. Hagar sees there's no water left. She says, forget it. She threw him tachas achad hasichim. Siach is 3:18. Tachas. She said, we're going to go under 3:18. Under 3:18 is what? Yush. Goyim fall in Yush. But a Yehudi, a Yid, ein le-Yehudi le-Yisyayish me'olam, a Jew never gives up hope. This is the building block. This is the fabric of our creation, that we never give up hope. There's a famous vart from Rav Nachman of Breslov. It's also over here from the Sefer Sheva Yipol Tzadik. He quotes Rabbi Ben Sion Abba Shaul. It's well known that Rabbi Ben Sion Abba Shaul, when he was a young boy, he was a shovav. You know what a shovav is? A bandit. Daniel HaShovav, right? And to the point where he was, they threw him out of Yeshiva Porat Yosef. He was out, and he has no shot. And he had a beg, and his parents had a beg, and they got him back in. And to the point he became one of the Gedolei Yisrael. He reviewed everything he learned 40 to 60 times. And Sion Abba Shaul writes that people think that the reason why that they're not being successful, a person thinks, I'm not being successful? Forget it, let me give up hope. They think they're not successful, and therefore they give up hope. It's just the opposite. It's because they give up hope, that's why they're not successful. He says the main cause of Yush is atzlos, is laziness. A person would rather say, person's lazy, so a person says to himself, it's too hard anyway, let me just throw in the towel. It's so convenient to throw in the towel, because once you throw in the towel, then you're excused. It's impossible. I'm addicted. That's also I'm addicted. I can't stop it. That's the easy way. It's a cop-out. Throwing in the towel is a cop-out. If a person would recognize it's stemming, it's sourced in laziness, a person doesn't want to put in the hard work. If a person puts in the work, they could get anywhere. Let's end with the following. Says the Ben Ish Chai that, a person thinks, it's been so many years, I did so many things wrong, my neshama is so sullied, so dirtied. Says the Ben Ish Chai in Parshas Vayeshev, Chadoshim labekarim rabba emunasecha. Every day a person gets a new neshama. Whatever's on your neshama from yesterday, past performance has no bearing on future outcome. Every moment is a new opportunity, is a new start. It doesn't matter what a person did in the past. It doesn't matter how low a person fell. B'chol yoim nasa beria chadasha. Every moment a person could yank themselves up, could fight the war of the four kings, could come out of Mitzrayim. That's why it's such a fundamental idea in Yadus, Zeicher Yetzias Mitzrayim. We can never forget it. There was no situation in history as bleak as Mitzrayim, and Keheref Ayin. The Yibban Shem took us out. That everyone should be zoicha to have the Yeshuas that they're looking for, beguf, benefesh, beruchnios. This is the limud of Eliezer, Kilekei Avi Be'ezri, the limud of overcoming Yush, and the limud of the woman who said, I am a descendant of my father had 318 slaves. Rabbi Say, have a great day.
I just thought, what about the Shiur?
You've just experienced another Torah class brought to you by TorahAnytime.com.